Absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. Peter, let me start with you on your reaction to the fact that he did it. He actually got up on the stand and it's ongoing.
It really seems like he did it against the advice of counsel, but I think his lawyers did a good job of setting the record for any appellate issues that, Judge, this may have gone differently if all the financial crimes and the side of the road incident and all that didn't come in, Judge. Maybe this would have been different, especially if this goes poorly for our client. They might as well have said, because this is going to be an appellate issue. If it goes poorly, if he gets convicted, they testified. If all this other stuff wouldn't have come in and now he's got to explain himself, now he's got to talk to this jury. But to me, it seemed like he was pretty resolute. He wanted to talk to this jury regardless of what his lawyer said.
Ronnie, I see him up there and I think to myself, this is a guy who always thinks he knows better. This is a guy who's such a skilled and effective and successful for much of his life liar. He's used to doing it and he is convinced that he and he alone can bring this jury over to the promised land. What do you make of it?
I agree. I said last night I would put this in the legal pantheon of bad ideas for him to take the stand. I thought his defense was frankly doing a pretty good job of creating some doubt. I didn't think this was necessary. I thought the only thing you could do is talk your way into jail. But obviously he's very comfortable in his home court and he feels like these are his people and he can talk to them.
It's great. So this courtroom, as I understand it, actually has pictures of his granddad and maybe great-granddad who were the prosecutors there, the lead prosecutors in that jurisdiction. He comes from a long line of solicitors, meaning chief prosecutor in the district. It's his courtroom. He's familiar in it. He's tried cases in it, I'm sure, as a trial lawyer himself. And there he is up there. Just one more time, all I can do is spin this jury. I can spin all the evidence I've heard so far. And he is, I believe, guilty. I don't know whether he's guilty, but I believe he did it. And so he's a master manipulator. Even if you think he didn't do this, but he just did all those financial crimes, he is a master manipulator. And you can see him up there. One of the things I noticed, Peter, is he's talking about the dog collars down at the kennels. He's like, yeah, down there, the dogs have 5, maybe 6 collars normally down there that track them. Oh, see, it's me, Alec Murdoch. I just want to help you, members of the jury. That's how precise I am when it comes to facts and wanting to be your very good assistant. I just came up here to set the record straight because you've been so misled by the big bad prosecutor.
Absolutely. And I think that he's spot on with how the defense is performed in their theory of this case is all, you can't prove this. There's not enough evidence. It was a bad investigation. There's reasonable doubt here. And I don't understand. I think there are some cases where the defendant can testify, can do a good job, can help his or her case. But in this situation, when you're saying the investigation was horrible, they don't have enough evidence, they missed evidence, they can't prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, just to put Murdoch up on the stand is going to create issues with exactly what you're saying. People are going to pick apart everything he said. It's either too detailed or it's not detailed enough. That's too simple of an explanation or it's too complicated of an explanation. I don't see how he helps his case when your theory is they can't prove it. They don't know what happened, and it's up to them to prove what happened in that 15 or 17-minute period of time.
Ronnie, it seemed to me, given the way they began his direct testimony, and I'll play part of this, there was a reason he took that stand, and it was the Snapchat video that Paul, his son, the victim, one of the two, took right before the murders that we've had multiple witnesses testify has Alec Murdoch's voice on it. It was, according to the prosecution's timeline, I think within 6 minutes of the murders. Alec had told investigators he wasn't there at the time, that he was back at the house taking a nap. And this video is the closest thing we've had in the case to a smoking gun, showing that Alec misled investigators. He was clearly there moments before the murders. He was not back at home sleeping. And that is how they kicked off his testimony. It was stunning because they led with this. So clearly this is the main, there's a rule of primacy and recency with the jury. And frankly, it's true for any speech you give too. And what it means is the listener only remembers the first thing you said and the last thing that you said. And everything in the middle gets mucked up. So there's a reason they started with why he was on that Snapchat video. Do we have it? All right, listen.
Alec, why did you lie to Agent Owen, Agent Croft, and Deputy Rutland about the last time you saw Maggie and Paul?
As my addiction evolved over time, I would get in these situations or circumstances where I would get paranoid thinking. It could be anything that triggered it. It might be a look somebody gave me. It might be a reaction somebody had to something I did. It might be a policeman following me in a car. That night, June 7th, after finding Mags and Paul, Papa, don't talk to anybody without Danny with you. All my partners were just repeatedly telling me that. I had a deputy sheriff taking gunshot test from my hands. I'm sitting in a police car with David Owen asking me about my relationship with my wife and my son. And all those things coupled together after finding them, coupled with my distrust for SLED, caused me to have paranoid thoughts.
Ronnie, what did you make of that?
Well, I agree with you. If there was a moment that would have compelled him to the stand, it was the fact that he had lied to investigators about his whereabouts at the kennels. But for that fact, I don't think the state really had much of a chance of winning this case. So if there was a moment that he had to speak to, it was this moment. And that explanation is terrible. It's terrible. The idea that the drugs made me lie. It's a Monday. He's already testified it was a work day. He was completely lucid to go to work that day. He was completely lucid to have dinner with his family. He was completely lucid to drive into town to tend to his mother. But at the moment the investigator showed up and he had to speak to them for the first time, it was the drugs that caused him to tell a lie. And then on a going forward basis, he just maintained that lie. And it was also, according to his testimony, his distrust of SLED. I mean, that the family held the solicitor seat for 100 years, that they are SLED, they are law enforcement in Hampton County. So the explanation is preposterous.
Did you hear, Peter, did he claim that he took drugs after finding the bodies? Because Ronnie's got a good point. He was doing all this stuff. He looked fine. We saw a videotape of him about an hour prior to that where he's dealing with the family, he's dealing with the tree that they're replanting. He did not look like somebody who was out of his mind. Did he claim that he saw the bodies and he took a bunch of drugs and they drove him out of his mind and that's why he lied to SLED?
No, he specifically said it was his addiction, ongoing addiction, which this guy is getting multi-million-dollar verdicts while he's a drug addict on these pills. And I thought he said a very important word in that explanation, and that was these drugs and this addiction create paranoia. And if I'm the attorney general and I get up there and I say, so you were paranoid, you started to hear something, and that would make you run down and do bad things, right? Like lie to law enforcement. And then you spin that into, you get this news on 6-7, they were on to you, it's crashing down, Mr. Tinsley's coming after you, you think Maggie and Paul might have sold you out, and now you're paranoid. I think that's an easy thing to flip for the AG's office. I think they are sitting over there salivating. They cannot wait for cross-examination. I expect it to be a long cross-examination.
And we don't know. We're taping this today at 1 p.m. Eastern. We don't know how long the direct is going to last and when the cross will get started. I'm thinking if you're Dick Harpootlian, you want to make the prosecution get started today. You'd much rather not give them the fresh overnight to do all their prep and sick them on your client the next morning. I don't know. What's your guess on how long the direct testimony goes on?
I mean, I think that they're going to continue to go on for most of the day today, but I think you're exactly right. I think they're going to have them start cross. But because it's going to be such a long cross, I think there's no way they don't get the overnight to prep at least some questions tomorrow.
There's another word that Alec Murdoch used on the stand today that jumped out at me just as a human, as a woman, as a wife, as a mother, and it was he apologized to his relatives for lying in that bit that we just showed part of. I mean, he's admitting now that he lied to the authorities about it when he said, I never went down to the kennels that night prior to finding their dead bodies. And he says, I would never do anything intentionally to hurt them, meaning Maggie and Paul. Intentionally. Who would say that? Who would say that? You would say, I would never hurt my son. I would never hurt my spouse, ever. Like the placeholder of like intentionally in his own mind, I feel like that's sort of his own justification from having done it. Maybe he's telling himself it was the drugs that made him do it, or it was the outside pressures that made him do it. But like the real Alec Murdoch wouldn't do it. I just thought that was an odd word that jumped out at me. What did you make, Ronnie, like listening to him today? Because of course he denied that he killed them. He admitted that he lied about being at the kennels prior to finding the bodies, right around the time of the murders. What else jumped out at you so far that was meaningful about what he said?
Well, what's jumped out at me so far, not about his testimony so much, but they keep panning to the audience, and to see the reactions in the audience. We can't see the jury. I'd love to see how they're reacting right now, but Not a tear has been shed. Not even Buster, not his sister, not his brother. I mean, everyone in attendance is emotionless, which is really striking. So if they're my proxy jury, if the jury's receiving it the same way, then it may be falling on deaf ears. I thought the problem for his testimony was not so much the cross, which we know is going to be withering. I mean, he has to stick the landing on the direct. I mean, if he can't deliver that, if he can't emote and make that connection, then we don't even need to talk about the cross. And again, if the audience is any measure of the jury, I'm not seeing any impact whatsoever on the people inside that courtroom.
So, Peter, what's interesting is, yes, he is slick. I mean, I was kind of like, he's so slick. As soon as he took that stand, he was so casual, and forgive me for using this word in this context, but he was kind of likable. I mean, the way he talks, there's something about him that's kind of likable, but you don't like him. And that's what he's up against, because this jury, they're not going to fall under his spell. The odds are against that, because even though he has this likable way of talking, they've gotten to know him. We've heard, with the last couple of days of testimony, we heard about how he stole money from, was it a cop or a relative of a cop who got shot, and he was trying to bring a case on that guy's behalf, and he stole the money. He stole the money of his housekeeper who died, where he pursued that lawsuit, and he got $4 million, and he didn't tell the young boys about it. He kept it for himself. Meanwhile, the boys were facing financial hardships. He didn't, the jury, I'm going to guess, even if they don't think he committed these murders, arrives at this relationship with him, hating him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think there's no doubt about it. There's nothing wrong with saying he's a likable guy. He went through his whole career. That's how he got all these clients. That's how he got all these verdicts. That's how he lived his entire life, was being likable. And that's why he was able to keep up the scheme as long as he was, because he's a likable guy. But at this point, it's once you really know him, he's not a very likable guy. And I think some testimony came out yesterday. He stole money from his closest friend who was dying of colon cancer. I mean, it does not stop with what this guy is capable of, which is exactly the reason that they keep propensity evidence out of cases like this, which is, I think that's going to be an interesting discussion on appeal.
Explain that.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff to not like about him, but Mark Ball, one of his law partners yesterday, and I know Ronnie knows much more about this than I do, because I know he's been involved in some of this. But Mark Ball yesterday, I thought, put it perfectly. He's a jackass. I don't like him. He's a bad guy for stealing money, but just because he's done all that does not then mean he's done what he's accused of doing here in this courtroom. Doesn't mean he didn't do it. But
we have a little bit of that. We'll play it, and then we'll get Ronnie to respond. Go ahead.
When September the 2nd hit, it changed everything that I knew about Alec. I would have never believed that a guy that, was like family would have ever stolen from me, would have stolen from his family, would have stolen from his clients, or any of that. And so immediately you've got this rage, this emotion that you've got. And then on the 3rd, we go through this whole ordeal of determination. And then the 4th, it hits, and you're like, did the jackass kill himself because of anything else? And then as time progressed on and you see the scope of it, I mean, I don't know the guy that after September the 3rd and leading out, I don't know who that guy is. I mean, that's not Alec that I knew, right, and Alec that I loved, and Alec that all of us loved.
Just to set that up, Ronnie, for the audience before I get to you, that was him on cross-examination. He was Alec Murdoch's witness, and he's talking about how 3 months after the double murders, Alec Murdoch staged a fake attempted murder on himself. They said it was an attempt to suicide by, with help from somebody else, so that he could get his remaining son a $10 million life insurance policy. Many don't believe that. They think he just was trying to engender sympathy for himself, or try to make it look alternatively like the murderer's still out there and he's after me. That's more the prosecution side. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, so Mark Ball, I thought he was a compelling witness. I thought he was a real boomerang witness, right? So the defense calls him, really for two purposes. One, to say that the investigation was sloppy because Mark had visited the scene as well and saw things there that disturbed him. We all heard that testimony. But also,
like a golf ball size of a piece of Paul's skull, which both made you feel like sick and horrified about the nature of this crime, but also reminded you, what was that doing there? Like, why the defense is doing a good job of showing us how crappy the SLED managed the crime scene. Sorry, go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, no, the forensics are terrible. And if there's a sweet spot for the defense, it's hang on the motive, hang on the forensics, right? But so they bring in Mark for that purpose. And by the end of it, Mark has to sit there and catalog all the different thefts that Alex engaged in, all the different victims that he left behind, and then culminate with that testimony that you just played that said, I knew the guy for 30 years. Now looking back on it, I don't think I know him at all. So he is this chameleon. He's a skilled and cunning liar. And it's not just the theft of money, but it's the theft by deceit. And it's Alex's practice of when he's caught in a lie, he's that guy that will not admit it until you've got both shoulders pinned on the mat and a 10 count. And then he'll concede it, but then he'll move on to the next story.
For many parts of the country, February weather is cold and unforgiving. The days are short and sunlight can be hard to come by, and those days relaxing by the pool seem all too far away. But when you have a Michael Phelps swim spa by Master Spas, you can enjoy the best of a pool with the therapy of a hot tub, even in the middle of winter. Michael Phelps swim spas come in a variety of sizes to complement almost any yard, even if it's a small one. Michael Phelps swim spas by Master Spas have a water current so you can swim. You can do aquatic exercises, and you can just have fun with the kids. This is going to reinvent your family time. The water buoyancy will relieve pressure on aching joints. Enjoy pure relaxation in the massage therapy seats of the swim spa. And since it's heated, you can use it year-round in any climate. Michael Phelps swim spas are 100% made in the USA by Master Spas, the world's largest swim spa manufacturer. You are going to love your Michael Phelps swim spa by Master Spas. Go to masterspas.com. Put in the promo code MK to save $1,000 on a Michael Phelps swim spa or $500 on a Master Spas hot tub. Masterspas.com, promo code MK. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.